All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. We have beautiful, beautiful, and meaningful Gemara ahead of us today. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Avram Shidi Kelman, with the hope and tefillah that this Tisha B'Av will become a Yom Tiv filled with joy in the eternal Beis HaMikdash. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Ira and Miriam Grossman, for dedicating the shiurim this week in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Ira's mother, Freda Bas Shmuel. Avron and Gali Elbaum in commemoration of the 37th yahrzeit of Avron's grandmother, Rose Lerner, Rezel Bas Chanuch, and in the merit of a refuah shlema for Sarah Bas Rezel and Shraga Moshe Ben Fega. And we thank Sandy Hoffman for dedicating one of the 9 days of learning. It was a beautiful program the shul launched in memory of the precious neshamas perished during the Holocaust. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. And we'll say with that, let us begin. So remember again, we ended off yesterday with the beautiful Agadata, which is actually going to take us through a good part of Amud Aleph today, with the beautiful idea that the Gemara speaks about, or I should say the heartbreaking idea, that in this pre-Messianic era, Torah is going to be forgotten. Torah is going to be forgotten. It's the lo rav lalechem v'lo tzoma lamayim kim l'shmoa as divrei Hashem dynamic. So we left off, so the Gemara gave an example. What does mean Torah is going to be forgotten? So the Gemara gave an example of a woman who baked a loaf of bread, a loaf of truma bread, in a tamei oven, and she's going to go to the Beis Medrash and she's going to say, "What's the status of the loaf?" And the Gemara says, "I don't understand. What's the shayla? That's a pasuk, right? That's a mefurish pasuk. That obviously, if you bake a loaf of bread, truma bread, in a tamei oven, that of course the loaf is going to be tamei." To which the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, Ella, we're actually picking up, it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom on Kuf Lamed Chesed Beis 138b. So it says the Gemara, Ella leida im rishonahi ve'im shniyahi. So the Gemara says, ve'in maven. So what's going to happen? She shows us this Beis Medrash. No, everybody knows that the loaf is tamei. So what's her shaila? Is the loaf a rishon l'tumah or is the loaf a sheni l'tumah? So her shaila is in the level of tumah that it has. Is it a rishon or is it a sheni? To which the Gemara says, Han nami masnisini, but that's also an explicit halacha. Kidisnan, hasharetz shenimtza b'tanur. So if you find the sheretz inside of an oven, hapasha b'socho shniya, the bread inside of it is a sheni, shatanur tchila, because ultimately again the oven is a rishon. So we'll say, so if the oven is a rishon, the loaf becomes a sheni. What's there to talk about? So the Gemara says, mistapka luhu hada amarle rav adavar aval rava. Lechsie haytanur kiman demali tuma v'tehave pas rishona. So the Gemara says the shaila is as follows. We'll say on a technical tuma level. When let's say you have a sheretz inside of the tumah, do you view the entire oven as being filled with tumah? Is that how you view the oven? That the entire oven is filled with tumah, and therefore it's as if the davar hatame is touching the loaf itself. In which case, the loaf itself becomes a rishon or not. No, we don't say that we view the entire oven as filled with tumah. You might have thought that all utensils become tamei in the airspace of an earthenware vessel that became tamei itself. It is only food that becomes tamei in the airspace of a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel that itself is tamei, and not other utensils. So I will say, so the point the Gemara is making over here is, a woman will come with a shayla. Obviously, psukim that are written in the Torah, people know. Explicit mishnayos, people know. But in the future, in this pre-Messianic era, when someone comes with a more nuanced shayla, people will not know the answer even inside of the Beis Medrash. So listen to this. So I'll say, Tanya, Rabbi Shema Yochai Omer, Chas v'shalom, shetishtachach Torah mi'Yisrael. Rashbi says, no, Chas v'shalom, Torah will never be forgotten from Am Yisrael. Also, you have to understand something, that Rashbi lived through some of the most oppressive times, right? Rashbi saw what the Romans could do. Rashbi had to go into hiding because there was a Chas v'shalom, Torah will ever be forgotten from Klal Yisrael. Shnei Amar, kilo sishachach mipi zar'o. Because here the Gemara quotes from the pasuk in Devarim, kilo si shachach mi pizaro. Torah will never be forgotten. So what does it mean when the pasuk says before that they will spread out, they will fan out to seek out the word of Hashem, yet they will not find it? Shelo yimtzu halacha berura u'mishna berura b'makom echad. The idea is that there won't be a concentration of complete knowledge in any one place. The Torah will never be forgotten. What will happen in this pre-Messianic era is that there will kind of be a little bit of a diffusion of knowledge. So you will not find those who know halacha berura and mishnah berura in one place. So Rashi points out, halacha berura is betamim shlo yehi b'machlokes. So we'll say, halacha berura means people who know the reasons for things. Mishnah berura means people who know the halachas of things, the final conclusions of things. So the idea is you'll have people who know tamei mitzvahs, reasons for mitzvahs. You'll have other people who know halacha l'maisa, but you won't necessarily have those people in the same place. So you shotetu. You'll have to travel. You'll have to spread out in order to get the complete comprehension. Okay, Tanya. Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha will say a very dramatic Gemara. Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha says, "Imra isadar shetzaras rabos baus alav." If you see a generation where terrible suffering devolves upon this generation, tzaras rabos, say ubaduk b'dayani Yisrael. We'll say, what a strong Gemara. Go and look at judges. Look at the quality of Jewish judges. Right? What's their moral caliber? Shekol paranos sheba'ali olam lo ba'a ela b'shvil dayani Yisrael. Because any misfortune which comes to the world only comes as a result of inappropriate actions by Dayani Yisrael, by Jewish judges. Shene'emar Shimun azos Rashi Beis Yaakov Uketzine Beis Yisrael Hamisavim b'mishpat. So we'll say Gemara is going from the pasuk in Micha. Literally, listen, you heads of households, you leaders of Klal Yisrael who pervert justice. That's called Yeshari. Actually, you take everything that's straight and you make it crooked. Bonet Tzion b'damim, you build Tzion with blood. Yerushalayim ba'avla, Yerushalayim with wrongdoing. Rasha b'shochad yishpotu, koneh b'mechir yoru, nevia b'kesef yiksomu, v'al Hashem yishenu. So we'll say very strong wording. So literally, again, its heads would judge with bribery. Its kohanim could be sold, right? Sell, or I should say, deliver halacha for a price, and the neviim prophesize for money. And yet, v'al Hashem yishenu, they depend on Hashem. We'll see exactly what this means. So we'll say, so this is Rishayim Hein, Ela Shetalu B'tchona B'misha Amar V'haya Olam. So we'll say there is Rishayim. Obviously, the pasuk is describing judges and leaders who go ahead and use their positions not for the right things, and in fact end up perverting justice and end up doing terrible things. And yet they depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They assume that somehow the Ribono Shel Olam is going to bless their efforts with success. Lefichach, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu alein gimel paranios. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings upon them 3 different punishments, kineged gimel averus, corresponding to 3 averos. Shne'emar, lachin biglalchem. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, gimel averos, b'shochad yishpotu, because the pasuk refers to 3 different things. The pasuk that we just quoted from Micha says, b'shochad yishpotu, they will judge with bribery. B'mechir yoru, they will deliver judgment with a price. And the prophets prophesize for money. So these are the 3 averos, and as a result of the 3 averos, there are 3 punishments. Look at Rashi. Gimel Paran, it's just easy to see in Rashi first. Shesada techrash, the fields will be made desolate. Ayin tiyah, ulabamos yar. So ultimately it will be desolate, and the forests will become desolate. Desolation. Complete desolation. So the Gemara says, "L'fichach maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu alein gimel paranos." HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings 3 punishments corresponding to the 3 sins. The Keneged Averos Shaviyadim Shneimar Lachin Biglalchem Tzion Sada Tachrash. Tzion will become a plowed field. Yerushalayim Ayin Tiyah. Yerushalayim will become nothing. Will become desolate. The Harabayis Lebamos Yar. And Harabayis will become like an overgrown forest. Ve'in HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shchinaso Al Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not rest His presence on Klal Yisrael until the Jewish people take action and remove these judges and these enforcers who are evil. Shene'emar va'ashiva yadi alecha ve'etzraf kibar sigach. So what's here? The Gemara is quoting from the pasuk in Yeshaya. Vashivi adi alecha, I will go ahead and literally remove my hands from you. Ve'etzrav kabar sigecha, va'asira kol bidi layich. And afterwards it says, va'ashiva shovtecha kivarishona, v'yoatzecha kivatchila. So we'll say, let me just point out what's happening over here, because it's actually a very dramatic gemara. Whenever you see a theme like this in the eyes of Chazal, that all of the misfortune that occurs in the world occurs because of unrighteous or unscrupulous judges. It's a very strong statement. But I will say, just understand where that comes from in the minds of Chazal. The idea is that the world, the society cannot exist without a just judicial system. Right? Without a legal framework, society begins to crumble. So which means if those who are supposed to preserve the moral fabric of society through justice, through laws, themselves are corrupt, then of course it goes without saying there's going to be a dramatic trickle-down effect to the rest of society as well. So we'll say, so it's almost as if the Gemara is saying, is whatever's happening with the judges, that's going to be indicative of what's going to happen with the populace as well, whether it's immediate or a little bit delayed. So therefore, if the judges are corrupt and the judges are easily swayed and the judges are bought off, then by definition that highlights an incredible unraveling of the moral fabric of society, and unfortunately destruction is around the corner. What's even more amazing about this, Rabbi say, is that the Gemara Chazal place the obligation to affect change on the populace, right, which is really quite amazing, which makes sense. Corrupt people don't usually fix themselves. It's very interesting. So yet again, if you live in such a society, there is an obligation to step up. There is an obligation to try to remedy this, and a person can't expect the broken system to fix itself. It's quite amazing. So the Gemara goes right there. Amar Ula. Ula said, Rabbi say, incredible that we're learning these Gemaras these days. And Yerushalayim nifta ela b'tzedakah. Yerushalayim is only redeemed with tzedakah. Shene'emar tzion b'mishpat yipada v'shaveh b'tzedakah. Because Rabbi say the pasuk from Yeshaya that literally tzion, the mishpat yipada, will ultimately be redeemed with mishpat v'shaveha b'tzedakah, and we will come back as a result of tzedakah. So we'll say there's so much written about this particular phrase as well, what exactly this means of Yerushalayim nifta b'tzedakah. First of all, why Yerushalayim? Why? If I was talking about the Beis Hamikdash, what about Yerushalayim? If it's Yerushalayim, why not Eretz Yisrael? Again, there's so much, but I will say, but there's an incredible yisod, which is that it's tzedakah. It's acts of kindness that ultimately bring about geula. It's an incredible yisod. Yes, we have to learn Torah, and yes, we have to perform mitzvahs. These are all part of what we have to do as a Jew. But at the end of the day, it's the acts of kindness, it's the acts of chesed, it's the acts of tzedakah that we do for one another, that mamish are the things that actively bring about geula. It's incredible. Amar Papa, ibatli yihiri, batli amagushi. So Papa says, if the arrogant Jews, Yihiri Rashi says, Yisraelim hamisyarim bibloris ubimabushe yihirus, kiprashmalos. It's interesting. Literal translation is, Papa says, if the arrogant Jews would cease to exist, the Amagushim would also cease to exist. So Rashi says, interesting how Rashi defines Yehiri arrogant over here. He says, these are the Jews who wear the beloris. So remember again, the beloris was the popular Gentile or idolatrous haircut, where you had like the long piece of hair that would come out of the from the back, like a ponytail that would come back. That was called the beloris. So that's Yehiri. So apparently arrogant Jews would grow out their beloris, or they would wear clothing that reflected all of the styles of the time. So if the arrogant Jews would stop being arrogant, the Amagushim would stop bothering us. Who are the Amagushim? Rashi says, Batli Amagushi, Yebatlu Masisim Umadichim Hamasniim Osanu. So we'll say these refer to people who oppress us. Right? So in other words, the Gemara is saying over here is that sometimes the world has a cause and effect. That when the Jew becomes too arrogant, HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a force to push back on the arrogance in order to go ahead and reinstate a sense of humility. So if the arrogance stops, then by definition, the counterforce could stop as well. Similarly, Ibatli Dayani, if corrupt judges would stop to operate, Batli Gzirafti. The Gzirafti would also, who are the Gzirafti? Rashi says over here, Batli Dayani, Rishon Yisrael Shematin Din, if corrupt judges would stop to exist, then Batli Gzirafti, no Kshe Shotri Avodeko Chavim. Moses, so these were Gentile officers who were very oppressive in the enforcement of the law. So again, if there wouldn't be corrupt Jewish judges, we would not suffer oppression at the hands of a Gentile legal system. So the idea of is always this cause and effect. There are these things that happen that undermine the fabric of society, like arrogance, like corrupt judges. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates countermeasures to push us back. So again, if we don't want the countermeasures, then stop with the arrogance, stop with the corrupt judges. So how do we know this? That if the arrogance stops, so the amagushim will stop as well. Ve'etzov kibar sigayich. I batli dayani batli gzirafti dichsev hesir Hashem mishpatecha pnei oivecha. Okay. Amar Rabbi Miloi Mishun Belazar Rabbi Shimon. Ma'ida Amar Rabbi say, what's the meaning of the following pasuk? So the Gemara is quoting the pasuk from Yeshaya. Shavra Hashem mate Yishoim shevet moshlim. So what does this mean? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and literally broke the staff of the Rishoim, shevet moshlim, the staff of the rulers. So Shavra Hashem Ater Rishayim. So what does it mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu broke the staff of the Rishayim. Elu hadayonin shenaase makel chazanehem. These are the judges. These are the judges who become ultimately a staff to their chazaneim, to their overseers, So I'll say what this means is as follows: that sometimes if the judge is bought off, right? If the judge is bribed, so then what happens? The judge becomes a staff in the hand of he who bribed the judge, right? I bribed the judge, I'm going to get what I want. So now the judge becomes the staff in my hand to execute judgment in the way that I want. Shevet Moshlim, but who are the Shevet Moshlim? Elu Tamidei Chacham Sheva Mishpachos Hadayanim. Both say these are the Tamidei Chachamim that are in the families of Dayanim. Now, what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says Shevet Moshlim, Makel Egrofeim Shel Moshlim, Hanu Dayanim Misham, Shetamidei Chacham Shemishpachoseim Lahem. So both say, so what happened? How did these corrupt judges get into power at times? They had Torah scholars in their families. And again, people assume that because they had a Torah scholar in their family, therefore again, the judge was pious as well. And even when the Torah scholars saw that the judge was doing something wrong, so what? They didn't say anything. So the Talmidei Chachamim enabled the judges to operate in an inappropriate way. Well, so you see from here something absolutely amazing as well, which is, even if you're not committing the Aveira, but you're enabling the Aveira, that's problematic as well. Right? Becoming an enabler, right? Becoming an enabler for someone's wrongful activity comes with liability and culpability as well. Mar Zutra Amar Elu Tamidei Chachamim Shemalamdin Halachos Halachos Tzibor LeDayanei Bar. This refers to Tamidei Chachamim who teach halachos to empty judges. I will say now, what does this mean? So I will say the idea over here is really something very profound, which is that Talmid Chacham has to be careful who he teaches Torah to. Why? Because if that person is going to take the knowledge and do something inappropriate with it, so the Rebbe has some level of liability for that as well. So these Talmidei Chachamim who train these Dayanim, who know that these Dayanim are not going to really be fit to serve on the Jewish judiciary, bear some level of culpability when these very judges corrupt the din. Look at Rashi, the Dayanei Bar. Shavtachas o Tamidei Chachamim ma'amidin. I'm sorry. Shebe'av tachas o Tamidei Chachamim ma'amidin Dayanei Bar lodun es kol haba v'harbe dinin she'nim lachem b'hem meitzan. So let's listen to this. So the Talmid Chacham runs a Dayan course, and they assume that anyone who attends the Dayan course knows how to be a Dayan. The problem is they're not properly vetted. So what says the Talmid Chacham has liability for not properly vetting the Dayanim. What's the meaning of the pasuk? So also here the Gemara quotes the pasuk in Yeshaya. Ki kapechem nog alu badam. So literally again, your hands or your palms are filled with blood. That's bosechem ba'avon, your fingers with avon, with iniquity. Sisosechem dibru shaker, your lips speak falsehood. L'shonchem avla tege, your tongue articulates avla, articulates bad things. Also shaker. So what does this mean? Ki kapechem nigolu badam. What does it mean that your hands are filled with blood? Elu hadayon. Both say this refers to corrupt judges. Because corrupt judges, unfortunately, can have their hands filled with blood because of the erroneous rulings that they have delivered. That's Bosechem ba'avon. Your fingers are filled with sin. Elu sofri hadin. I must say this refers to, is actually incredible. This refers to the scribes of the judges. Because what do the scribes do? They write the what's the word? The verdict. Thank you. The verdict. Right. The psak din. Right. They write the verdict. So therefore, they're also complicit in the perversion of justice. Dibru sheker. They speak falsehood. Ella arche hadayanim. This is the lawyers. Okay. So we'll say. So in general, it's actually okay. There's a lot to talk about on that. So the idea over here is. So we'll say. I have to understand something. People think that Chazal are like sour on lawyers. It's not true. Lawyers are wonderful. But when the Chazal speak about arche dayanin, what they're talking about is as follows. They're talking about lawyers who essentially teach their client what to say, how to say it, even though it's not the truth, in order to get the outcome that they want. That's when Chazal say, alti ka'arche hadayanim, right? Don't be like lawyers. Don't be like lawyers, right? There are plenty of wonderful lawyers. But again, it's talking about someone very specific who is more interested in protecting or creating a particular outcome and not necessarily focused on arrival at the truth. So the Gemara says, so dibru sheker ela archei dayanim l'shon chen avla. So we'll say your tongue will articulate falsehood. Elu bale dinin. We'll say this refers to the litigants because sometimes the litigants themselves actively lie, just in order to go ahead and get their outcome. So we'll say, so you see again how much, you have a whole amud over here that's wrapped up in this incredible sugya of the need to go ahead and have an honest and integrity-laden judicial system. Judges who are appropriate. But I will say it's not just the appropriate of the judges, it's the lawyers, and it's the litigants. Any legal system only works if people in general operate in honesty. If people don't operate honestly, then again, you can have the best system in the world, but ultimately, again, it will disintegrate. But you see, we'll say, how the trickle-down effect. And we'll say, the Musar Haskell in this is, in general, whenever a person is in a leadership capacity, so they must be careful about how they act because there's always a trickle-down effect. And by the way, it's even true in your mishpacha, because every person is in a leadership capacity in their mishpacha. How you act as a person has a trickle-down effect on your spouse, on your children, on anyone, quote-unquote, when I say beneath you, I don't mean beneath you, I mean like under you, right? Under your leadership has an impact. The dayanim, if the dayanim are corrupt, their society can be great. It's only a matter of time until their lack of morality trickles down to the rest of society. A balabas, a head of household, is someone, unfortunately, is not who he should be. That's going to have a trickle-down effect on the household as well. So therefore, again, honest judges, good society. Honest head of household, good mishpacha. Again, obviously everyone has their own bechira also about what to do, what they don't do. But Lamaisa, what we do in a leadership capacity has a dramatic effect, a dramatic trickle-down effect on all those around us. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rabbi Milai, what's a beautiful Gemara? Mishum Yitzchak migad la, miyom shepirish Yosef me'achav lo tam yayin. What's very interesting. From the day that Yosef separated from his family, or from the day that he was sold, he never drank wine. Tichsiv ulekad kod nizir echav. Because it will say ultimately in the brachas of Yaakov Avinu, at the Parashas Vayechi, so he refers to Yosef as Nazir Echav. Rabbi Yosef Chanina Amar Afhi lo tamu tam yayin. The brothers also did not go ahead and drink wine from the day that they sold Yosef. So we'll say, so apparently, Dichsiv Vayishtu Vayishkeru Imo. Because we'll say this is talking about before Yosef revealed his identity to his brothers, so he invited all of them to go and have a meal with him, and they drank, and they became intoxicated. Right? Michlal da'at ha'idna lo hava shichrus, which indicates that we'll say this was like the first time. Up until now, they really had not, they didn't drink a lot. Vidach, the other opinion, will say, no. Shichrus hud lo havi shtia miyahava. It's true, the brothers did not get intoxicated, but they did drink wine. So we'll say, so the idea is in machlokes over here, everyone agrees that from the time that Yosef was sold, he did not drink wine as a sign of mourning from being separated from his mishpacha. What, did the brothers drink wine? Did the brothers not drink wine? So that's a machlokes. And I will say that machlokes is really quite fundamental because embedded in that machlokes is how the brothers really viewed the sale of Yosef. If you go with the idea that they too did not drink wine, that indicates that after they sold Yosef, they realized they had made a terrible mistake. They didn't know how to undo it, but they had made a terrible mistake. Whereas if you hold that no, they drank, so it could very well be that that's reflective of their feeling of justification about the sale of Yosef. So the Gemara says, "Ava Amra b'milai b'schar ura'acha v'samach b'libo Zacha l'choshen mishpat libavos. It's such a beautiful Gemara. Miloi says, in the merit of v'racha v'samach b'libavos. This is Chadash Baruch Hu speaking to Moshe. Moshe was reluctant. One of the reasons Moshe was reluctant to assume the position of leadership in Klal Yisrael was why? Because he felt that Aaron would feel passed over. Right? Aaron was older than Moshe, so how could it be that the younger brother is going to get the major position and the older brother will not? So he felt, what is Aaron going to say? And Chadash Baruch Hu tells him, don't worry. Aaron is going to be so incredibly happy for you. So Rabbi Miloi says in the schar, in the merit, that Aaron was happy for Moshe. Rav v'samach b'libo. But not just externally happy. Sometimes when someone gets something that you don't have, you appear happy for them, but inside you're not. Inside I'm not. Inside I'm jealous. Inside I'm upset. Inside I don't understand why you deserve this and I don't. Chadash Baruch Hu tells Moshe, "V'racha v'samach b'libo." I can testify Aaron's joy will not simply be external; it'll be internal as well. So the Gemara says, in the merit of Aaron being truly joyous, truly joyful for Moshe Rabbeinu's accomplishment, Aaron merited the choshen. Right, the breastplate. And the breastplate is put over the heart. It will say such an incredible yesod about the need to be happy for someone else's accomplishments. It's difficult because sometimes someone gets a bracha or someone has an accomplishment that I don't have, and I feel jealous. And that's normal. That's a normal reaction. But to work on ourselves where we could feel truly happy for someone else. Because they're both say, the klal gadol in life is that you have what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to have, and someone else having something does not mean that it came at your expense. So the ability to go ahead and be genuinely happy for someone, even if you don't have that very thing that they have, and you want that very thing, that's the mid of Aaron HaKohen. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives back that person, bracha kiflei kiflayim. Aaron was happy, so Aaron gets the choshen. Sholchu le b'nei bischar leLevi. Kila mahu, kshusa mahu. So let's listen to this back to Shabbos a little bit. So what's the halacha concerning the canopy? And Keshusa bekarma mahu. What's the halacha concerning hops in a vineyard? Meis b'yom tov mahu. What's the halacha with burying the dead on Yom Tov? Okay, so 3 questions firing off. Ada Azil. So we'll say, so what happened? So Ada Azil nach nafshei de Levi. So we'll say, so as they before they came or as they came, Levi passed away. Amr, so they had asked this question to Levi. Levi passed away. Amr Shmuel Rav Menashia, Ichachimas Shalach Lahu. So if you are wise enough to answer this, answer the questions. Shalach Lahu. So he sent the following answers. Kila, regarding a canopy on Shabbos. Well, so this goes back to yesterday's daf. Can you go ahead and put up a canopy on Shabbos? Chazanu al kol tzidei kila, v'lo matzanu leit tzad heter. We will examine the issue from all angles, and there is no heter, there is no permissibility to put up a canopy on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, really? We'll say that's not true. Remember, what did Rabbi Bar Yecheskel say in yesterday's daf? Rabbi Bar Yecheskel said that you could put up a canopy as long as what? You attached part of it before Shabbos. As long as you attached part of it before Shabbos, and you could just pull down on the rest of it, and it spreads out, you could do that on Shabbos. So why not give that eitzah? To which the Gemara says, "Lefisha inon b'nei Torah," because they'll say apparently the people of b'nei Bischar were not b'nei Torah. So therefore, again, Shmuel was very concerned. Or Rav Menashe was very concerned to give them a heter because he felt that they would exploit the heter. Kshusa bekarma, so irvuva v'lishlachlu. So we'll say, listen to this. So we'll say they're asking now a kilayim question. So I'll say, so the shaila was kilayim. Kshusa hops. Are hops considered to be a type of vegetable? If it's a type of vegetable, then it's subject to kilayim. If it's, however, something that grows, if it's considered to be a tree-growing item, then lemais, it's not subject to kilayim. So the Gemara says, "V'lishlach luhu kid Rabbi Tarfon." So why don't you go ahead and send them the answer like Rabbi Tarfon? What did Rabbi Tarfon? So the Sanya Kishos, when it comes to hops, Rabbi Tarfon Omer in kilayim bekerem. Rabbi Tarfon says they're not subject to kilayim. V'cham necham say kilayim bekerem. The kaimel and Abba say generally we say kolamekel ba'aretz halacha kimoso v'chutz la'aretz. In general, Abba say the halacha by kilayim is that whoever who's mekel, right? Whoever is mekel. So although we might not paskin that way in Eretz Yisrael, when it comes to kilayim in chutz la'aretz, we always paskin like the mekel opinion. So Abba say b'nei bischar is chutz la'aretz. So then the halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon, namely that that hops, kishos are not subject to kilayim. Lefi she'inon b'nei Torah. Because we'll say again, apparently you begin to see that Shmuel Rav Menashe were very concerned that apparently the people of Bnei Bischar were not B'nai Torah. Right? They weren't particularly religious individuals, and they were concerned. There was a concern that if we give them a heter, if we give them a leniency, they will exploit that leniency in inappropriate ways. So Machriz Rav Haiman Debaila Mizrak Shusa Bekarma. So Rav used to announce the following: whoever wants to sow hops in a vineyard, Lizra should go ahead and do so. No problem. Rav was saying the hops essentially are treated like an item that grows from a tree. As such, there is no issue of kilayim. Rav Amram Chasida Man Gidalia. And Rav Amram Chasida, if somebody would plant hops in a vineyard, he would administer malchus. Rav Misharshia, Yoav Le Pruta Latinok Nachri Vizarle. Rav Misharshia wouldn't do it himself, but what? He would give a pruta to a Gentile child and ask the child to plant the hops in the vineyard. I Velitin Le Latinok Yisrael. But why not go give the pruta to a Jewish child, Asi the Misrach? Because there was a concern that I'd say, obviously, Rav Misharshia felt that a Jew shouldn't do this himself, but you could have it done through a guy. So the problem is if you begin to use a Jewish child to do this, the Jewish child may come to do this even when he reaches the age of adulthood. Why not go ahead and give it? So why do you have to give it to a Gentile child? Why not give it to a Gentile adult to do it? Ultimately, again, you may come to confuse an adult Gentile with an adult Jew. What a sad statement. But Lamaisi, you may come to confuse them, and therefore may come to end up using an adult Jew. So the Gemara says mace. We will say, so what about again a mace on Yom Tiv? What do you do with a corpse on Yom Tiv? Well, it's a very important sugya. So the Gemara says, Shalach lahu mace lo yisasku bei lo yudon v'lo araman lo b'yom tiv rishon v'lo b'yom tiv sheni. So we'll say, so they sent to the people b'nei Bischar a mace. You should not go ahead and bury the dead. No one should go ahead and deal with the body. Not a Jew, not a non-Jew, not on the first day Yom Tov, not on the second day Yom Tov. Is that true, Ini? There was an episode in the shul of Ma'on, which is Eretz Yisrael, shul of Ma'on, on Yom Tov that fell out right next to Shabbos. Now, what we don't know, Amud Beis, v'lo yidana imi lefana imi lachara. So we'll say, here's what I know. Someone died on Yom Tiv. Now, what they're not sure about the story is, was the Yom Tiv on Friday or was Yom Tiv on Sunday? It wasn't exactly clear. And I will say what happened. Asu l'kameit Rabbi Yochanan v'amar lahu yisasku be'amamin. And Rabbi Yochanan said, you could have non-Jews bury the mace. You could have non-Jews bury the mace in this type of situation. Rashi says, "V'lo yadani imil fanah im chal yom tov bar Shabbos u'meis bo bayom u'mipnei shelo yuchlu lis'asik bo l'machar yitiru l'kovra aydi amos." So again, what we're not sure about is when exactly Yom Tov fell out. But what we do know is that at the end of the day, they allowed for non-Jews to go ahead and bury the mace. V'amar Rava said as follows: "Mace b'Yom Tov Rishon yis'asku bo amamin." Right? If a person dies on the first day of Yom Tov, so we don't allow Jews to conduct the burial, but we allow non-Jews to conduct the burial. So we allow non-Jews to perform a kvura for a Jew on Yom Tov Rishon. The Yom Tov Sheni, what happens if the person dies on Yom Tov Sheni? Yisasku bo Yisrael. So both on Yom Tov Sheni, so even ultimately again, Jews are permitted to bury a fellow Jew. Va'afilu b'Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah. And I will say, this is true even on the second day Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah. I will say, now normally again, remember, second day Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah is treated differently than normal Yom Tov Sheni Shal Galius. Because remember again, second day Rosh Hashanah is observed even in Eretz Yisrael. That's the concept of Yom Arichta, one long day. Okay, we're not getting into all technicalities, but the point over here is that halacha l'maisa, Rava said, and this is codified in Shulchan Aruch, by the way, that if a person dies on the first day of Yom Tov, you could have non-Jews bury the person. Person dies on Yom Tov Sheni, even Jews are permitted to go ahead and perform the Kvura on Yom Tov Sheni, and even second day Rosh Hashanah. Masha'in came bebeitza. I will say, just again, interestingly enough, these halachas don't apply to an egg, right? So, right, Beitza Shenal D'Bi Yom Tov is still going to be. Rashi says, "Dein Rosh Hashanah shaval yomim tovim shal galios Rosh Hashanah chamer Yom Tov Sheni delay v'nol d'bazeh asur bazeh." So I'll say, so just as an aside, an egg that was born on the first day of Yom Tov can't be consumed that day, but can be consumed on Yom Tov Sheni, whereas Rosh Hashanah is not like that. Okay, Fine, not really important. No, it's very important, but not for our sugya. We'll say. So just point out over here. So how do they? So remember, Bnei Bischar are asking, what do we do with the mace on Yom Tiv? So the answer was nothing. You leave the person unburied till after Yom Tiv, and you'll bury Yom Tiv. The Gemara says what? Rava said explicitly that's not true. Person dies on Yom Tiv. Yom Tiv Rishon. Gentiles could go and attend to the burial. Yom Tiv Sheni, second day Yom Tiv, even Jews could attend to the burial. So again, I will say same thing. She'enon b'nei Torah. So we'll say you see that the rabbis were reticent to give kulas, to give certain leniencies to the people of Bischar, because apparently they were not b'nei Torah. They were not observant or serious about their observance, and because of that, there was a concern that they would exploit leniencies. So in order to avoid any potential issues with this, so the rabbis therefore are machmir with them. We'll say, so just as an aside, what do this halakha? This halakha is codified in Shulchan Aruch, that if a person dies on the first day Yom Tiv, you're permitted to hire Gentiles to go ahead and take care of the burial. Yom Tiv Sheni, even Jews could do it. So we'll say, we don't do this today. So the Moshe finds the Chesed Levracha has a tshuva where he writes that today it's different, because today we have refrigeration. So we'll say the whole heter to go ahead and bury on Yom Tiv was the concern of leaving a body potentially unburied for 2 days. Right? So decomposition could be significant. Even 1 day decomposition could be significant. So the Moshe says that today, since we have refrigeration, there's a way to keep the mace intact and not have to bury on Yom Tiv. I will say, but it is interesting to note, in many of the Hasidic communities, they still bury on Yom Tov Sheni. They still, in fact, again, I think it was a number of years ago, I think the Satmar Rebbe, I think this was Rabbi Yoel, I think, or maybe it was some Rebbe after him, there was a terrible, terrible fire that his granddaughter and I think her daughter were killed on Yom Tov. I believe that the Kvura actually took place on the second day Yom Tov. I have to look up the details of that. But again, we don't do this. I think also someone once mentioned to me that in the Breuers community, they also bury on second day Yom Tov, but again, al yidei nachrim, not with Jews, but ultimately going through non-Jews. But again, I think conventional practices like Rav Moshe, that halacha l'maisa, we wait until after Yom Tov to bury, because the kavod hameis remains intact, ultimately because of refrigeration. Good. Says the Gemara, Am Rabbi Abin bar Rav Huna, Am Rav Chama bar Guria. Mis'atev adam b'kila, ubekis keseha, v'yotzer shram. So let's listen to this. A person could take a kila, canopy, and I will say canopy is really just a large piece of fabric. So a person could take a canopy and essentially use it as a cloak. Now I will say, now even though the canopy has strings that come off it, because that's how you would anchor it down, and those strings, of course, those strings kind of drag behind me a little bit, you could still wrap yourself up in the canopy and go out on Shabbos. And there's nothing to be concerned about. So the Gemara says, so we'll say the issue that I might have thought was that halacha l'maisa, those strings that kind of come off the canopy are really not part of the malbush, and therefore maybe that's problematic. So the Gemara says it's not problematic. You could wrap yourself in the canopy, essentially go ahead and use it as an article of clothing, and the straps are not considered to be a masui. So the Gemara says, Mai shnami Rav Huna, Dom Rav Huna, Amarav, Hayotzi v'tala shirim etzuyah. It says, Kil chasa b'Shabbos chayiv chatos. So we'll say, but yet we learned, Rav said, if you go out with a four-cornered garment that has tzitzis on it, but the tzitzis are not tied correctly, you're chayiv chatos. Why are you chayiv chatos? Because you view it as if you're carrying the strings. Even though the cloak is a cloak, right? It's an article of clothing. But we view the strings as something additional that you are carrying. So why is this case different? So we'll say, so this sounds exactly like the case of wearing the kila. So right, just like if you wear the cloak that is not properly tzitzist, right? So the strings are there. You're chayiv for carrying the strings. So why would I not be chayiv for carrying the straps of the kila as well? To which the answer is very simple. Tzitzis legabe talis chashivi v'lo batli. Because I will say that tzitzis, vis-a-vis the garment, are considered to be chashiv and therefore not bottled to the garment. That's why it's viewed as if you're carrying the tzitzis. Hani lo chashivi ubatli. But these, ultimately, again, these straps that are part of the kila are not chashiv. They're not chashiv. So because they're not chashiv, they're bottled to the kila, to the canopy. And therefore, when you wear the canopy out on Shabbos, we essentially view that as you're just simply wearing a garment. Amar Rava bar Rav Huna, Marim Adam ala Mishmeres B'Yomtov Litlos Barimonim Etola Bashmaras. What's another interesting case? So we'll say a person, now Marim literally means like a person could employ a little bit of subterfuge. What does that mean? So let's remember again, we started this parak by talking about the idea that you cannot go ahead and arrange a strainer on the opening of a barrel. So we'll say there were two issues involved. So one was because you're making an ohel, right, for the interior of the barrel. What we spoke about again, really what that's an issue of is uvda dechol, weekday activity. And of course, the act of pouring the wine through the strainer itself will also be problematic. Right? Machlokes. Is it borer? Is it meraked? But it's going to be usher as well. So now, listen to this. Comes on Rav Ashi, comes on Rabbi Rav Huna and says, what you can do is as follows. You could arrange a strainer on top of the barrel with the intention to use it to hold pomegranates. So again, I'm not using it to strain wine. I'm just going to putting pomegranates in it. And then once it's there to go ahead and put pomegranates in it, you could also use it to strain wine. So we'll say something, or you couldn't go ahead and put up this strainer on the top of the barrel to strain wine, but you could do it. You could put it there to keep pomegranates, and once you put it there to keep pomegranates, then you can use it to strain wine as well. Look at Rashi. I will say, Marim Adam Alam Mishras B'Yom Lo Rabban Adam Ein Tolinas Al Mishras B'Yom Tov Lo Kimna the time of Mishum Oil Al Mishum Uvda Dechol Marim V'Tola Os Latzar Chimonim the Lav Uvdin Dechol Ninu. So listen to this. So what Rabbi Rav Huna is saying is as follows. This is Yom Tov now. Yom Tov. So halacha l'maisa, I'm not allowed to put up the strainer on the opening of the barrel on Yom Tov. Why not? According to the Rabbanan, uvdin dechol. It's weekday activity. So I say, you know what? I'm putting up a strainer, but I'm not using it to strain wine. I want to use it to hold pomegranates. Okay, you can do that to hold pomegranates. And once it's there to hold pomegranates, then what? Then I'm going to use it to strain wine. So essentially that's the haram. I'll say that's a little bit of subterfuge. So I can't put it up to strain wine. I'm not putting it there to strain wine. I'm putting it there to hold pomegranates. And once it's there to hold pomegranates, is all on Yom Tiv, I'll pour wine through it to strain the wine from my yellow as well. Amar Rav Ashi, v'hu detala barimonim. Rav Ashi says that works, but it only works if what? If you actually and literally put pomegranates in there. Really? I will say, why is it different in the following case? So I will say, you can make new beer. And I will say, now the act of making beer is a very intense process, which normally we would not want you to do on Yom Tiv unless you really need it. But let's say again, I just want to make more beer now. And again, we'll say maybe even I want to make more beer because I want to have beer after Yom Tiv. I drink a lot of beer. I want to make sure that after Yom Tiv I'm not out of beer. That's the worst feeling in the world, right? After Yom Tiv and you're out of beer. So I'll say, so what happens? So I want to make more beer on Yom Tiv. Or I say I'm really on Chalamayid. But I will say, but I have beer. I have beer. So watch this. So matilin shechar b'moed l'tzorach hamoed shelo l'tzorach hamoed aser. So I will say you can make beer on Yom Tiv, on Chalamayid, for the sake of Yom Tiv. But again, if you want to make beer for after Yom Tiv, that's aser. Echad shechar tamarim ve'echad shechar sa'orim. Whether you're making date beer, whether you're making barley beer, afapi sheyesh lahen yashan ma'arim v'shosam and echadish. So we'll say, what can you do? But if you're going to make beer and drink that beer, then you're okay. Then you could do that. So we'll say, or what it's saying over here is that halacha l'maisa, as long as I can drink from that new beer on Yom Tiv, that's enough. So we'll say it's interesting. The way the Gemara is understanding this case is that halacha l'maisa, I don't actually have to drink from the beer. As long as I can drink from the beer, that's going to be enough. Which seems to indicate to me that halacha l'maisa. So remember again, let's go back for just a moment. The Gemara says you could put up the sieve on the barrel because you could use it for pomegranates. And Rav Ashi said that you have to actually put pomegranates in it. To which the Gemara contrasts this with the beer case. Because in the beer case, what it sounds like is, as long as I can drink from the new beer, that's going to be enough. To which the Gemara says, Hasam lo muchacha milsa, hacha muchacha milsa. We'll say, here's the fundamental difference. Look at Rashi. Hasam lav mucha milsa, de milsa di surahu daro omer l'tzorach hamod. We'll say, here's the difference. When you brew beer, there's nothing that looks usher about that. Why not? Because somebody looks at that, and what do they assume? So you're both saying, everything is always about the narrative we assume people ascribe to my actions. If someone sees me brewing beer on Chalamayid, what's the narrative they'll attach to that? What's the narrative? You want to drink beer. If I finish my Yom Tiv beer, I need beer for Yom Tiv. Because you're going to both say, again, that's a drink that people drink all the time, Basudas. So again, somebody sees me brewing beer on Yom Tiv, not on Yom Tov. Again, when I say Chalamayid, because you can't do it on Yom Tov, Chalamayid, so we'll say, so again, the narrative is very simple. He needs beer for Yom Tov. Therefore, again, I will say, because of that, my actions kind of stand on their own, and as long as that beer is technically usable on Yom Tov, whether I use it or not is really irrelevant, I could do it on On the flip side, hacha muchacha milsa. They both say, but in the case of the strainer, right? When someone sees me putting a strainer on top of a barrel, we'll say, what's the narrative? What's the assumed narrative? What am I doing? What am I doing? I'm straining wine. I'm straining wine. No one's going to say, oh, he's storing pomegranates, right? They will say, so because of that, everything is what your action looks like. In the case of the beer, the action looks fine. In the case, ultimately, of the strainer, it does not. Therefore, again, Rav Ashi says, you could put the strainer on the barrel to store pomegranates, but what? But what? You have to put the pomegranates in there. Amalei Rabbanan Rav Ashi, Chazi Mar Haitzur Mirabanav, Rav Huna Barav, Rav Chivan Shmei, Rav Huna Bar Chilavon Shmei. Listen to this. So they said the Rabbanan said to Rav Ashi, but didn't you see this Talmud Chacham? So again, it's Machlokes who he is. What did he do? The Shakol Brad Tuma Umanach Bebaraza Dedana. He took a clove of garlic and he stuck it in the spigot of the barrel. Va'amar Litznui Kamechavna. And he said, now again, obviously, that act of going ahead and plugging up the barrel, I will say, seems to be like a case of tikkun mana, fixing a utensil. Yet the Talmud Chacham did it, and what did he say? He said, no, I'm not fixing the barrel. I'm just storing my garlic over here. And yet, again, nobody said anything to him. Azil v'nam b'mavra, v'avlaki. So furthermore, I will say, what did he do? On Shabbos, right, he decided to take a nap on the boat, even though, again, he knew that the boat was going to go to the other side of the river. And he had a vineyard, right? Or he had orchards on the other side of the river. He wanted to get to the other side of the river to check on his Shabbos. So what did he do? He took a nap on the boat, even though he knew that the boat was going to go to the other side of the river. And he said, all I have in mind is to take a nap. So again, these are cases where a Talmud Chacham is going ahead and doing something. So right, he's clearly, when he puts the clove of garlic in there, he does so in order to what? To go ahead and fix the utensil. And we'll say, we'll stop over here for today, because I don't want to rush through this, because it's actually very important. We'll stop here. We'll pick up. I know we'll have a lot to do tomorrow, but we'll pick up with this story about the Talmud Chacham in Meretz Hashem tomorrow, and we'll go from there. We'll say Yeshakayach.